Excuse me. Welcome to the free astrotheology course. I'm Dr. Yasapa from Zion Law School. Our textbook is The Gospel and the Zodiac. I'm sorry, no. Our textbook is The Devil's Pulpit. All right, the author is Robert Taylor. The link to the free PDF is in the description area of this video, along with many of the Ancient Ibaryath books that I've written and links to my classes, okay? So let's get started. We are going to continue with Freemasonry, the lecture on Freemasonry, part 1. Freemasonry, part 1. What page are we on? We are on page... We are on page 241. I'm sorry, 242. Yeah, page 242. Okay, page 242. Oh boy. Give me a second, y'all. I'm waiting for my honey to dissolve in my coffee. Okay. Excuse me. So let's start at the top. Well, the first paragraph on page 242. The meaning of a thing was always that part of it which a Christian never wished to know about. I have experienced that to be true in my life, y'all. But granting what no longer can be denied, among men of learning, among those of us who study, who are educated, formally educated or self-taught, doesn't matter. Those of us who have acquired the discipline of acquiring knowledge and then teaching ourselves or being taught how to use it. That is actually the real definition of an educated person. Okay, how to use, knowing where to get information and how to use it to your advantage. Okay, that is an education. Anyway, let's continue. The epistle to the Hebrews is anonymous and dateless. Now, scholars, if you get a letter in the mail, and it doesn't have the name of a natural person on it, and it has no date, you know it's fraud in Morocco, right? In North America. It's fraud. Okay? It is not known by whom, this is the letter to the Hebrews, it is not known by whom or when it was written. Yet it was written to somebody or some community of persons. Now, scholars, you should recall that the author made the claim that the letter was written by a high-level Freemason. In fact, let me go back to that. And this high-level Freemason, according to the author, had attained the high degree or the Hebraic degree in Freemasonry, and that the letter is written to those Freemasons, okay, those high-level Freemasons. And these high-level Freemasons, of course, are those who had already learned that the Gospels are astrotheology. Let's continue. Yet the letter to the Hebrews, was written to somebody or some community of persons. And our want of the light of date and name may be supplied by the light reflected from the implied character of the persons or community of persons to whom it purports to be addressed. Well, absolutely. Absolutely. Our want of light of date, in other words, the date is in darkness. We don't know it. So we want to know what the date is. We want to shed light on that information. All right. Also, to whom it was written. And you can, the author is saying, you can tell by the language. You can tell by the writing style, the content, etc., who the letter was written to. All right, but let's let the author develop this. It, that is the letter to the Hebrews, it is called, at any rate, to the epistle to the Hebrews. The Hebrews. Then who are, or were, or what is, or what was meant by the Hebrews? Well, that's a darn good question, right? People are still debating what Hebrew means and who the Hebrews are. Okay, we have two competing groups claiming to be Hebrews, right? Those who say they are Jews and who are not, and then the Hebrew Israelites. Okay, y'all? So who are the Hebrews? Now, sirs, do I put it to your own authority of judgment to judge? And now, scholars, do I, says the author, put it to your own common sense. Use your own reasoning. Use your own analytical and critical thinking skills. Use your own faculty of reason as the author presents to you the facts and the evidence, and you can decide for yourself who are the Hebrews. Okay? I put it to your own authority of judgment to judge who is the scholar and worthy to be revered as a teacher, having something that he can teach and you can learn. I, says the author, who can teach and tell you who the Hebrews are. And we're going to hold him to it. He said it in plain words. His claim is that he can tell you who the Hebrews are based upon his facts and evidence. So let's hold him to it. Let's hold him to it. If not, he gets no full faith and credit from us, at least from me. Let me speak for myself. And what the meaning of this epistle to the Hebrews is. So the author is telling you, he can tell you the meaning of what the letter of the Hebrews is, okay? Or your spiritual pastors and masters who cannot. So the author is saying, judge between he, himself, the Reverend Robert Taylor, and your religious leaders. And based upon the facts and the evidence, not the doctrine and belief system, but based upon the facts and the evidence, you decide who the real teacher is. Who has something for you to learn? Who has the truth, as it were? The Reverend Robert Taylor, or today, your pastor, your minister, your imam, your preacher, your pastor, what have you. Now remember, this was written in 1831, but this discussion is still being had today. It begs the question, why? Why almost 200 years later, it's still not clear who the Hebrews are, or who wrote the Hebrews. Who is the Hebrew, who's the letter addressed to? What's the actual meaning of it? What does it really say? Why is this still up in the air 200 years later? And you got all of these scholars, pastors and preachers, PhD in religion, PhD in all of this kind of stuff, whatever they do their PhDs in, and they still haven't solved this basic fundamental question. Anyway, let's continue. And if they did solve it, you can best believe they just made it up. Anyway, let's continue. as they are profoundly ignorant themselves, that's the preachers and the pastors, your masters, have no protection for their monopoly. See, once the facts and the evidence gets out, their protection is gone. Their protection is your fear. Their protection of their industry is your fear. But the trick of suppressing curiosity, meaning don't even ask the question. Y'all know in the Hindu religion, from what I watched a video, I saw this video years ago, and I watched it again, and there was a gentleman from India who was saying that there was a time, maybe it's still that way, but in the actual holy books in Hinduism, they would tell that written in the holy books, you would be punished for even asking a question that doubts your position in society. Y'all hear me? Just like your preachers and pastors tell y'all today that you're blaspheming the Holy Spirit or being disrespectful if you ask hard questions or questions about topics that they don't want to talk about. It's no different. So they suppress curiosity. And warning you not to go to the rotunda. The rotunda is a place that the author gave these astrotheology lectures that exposed the Gospels and many parts in the Old Testament that are astrotheology. And why did they do it? For fear you should find out. For fear that you should find out that this is astrotheology, that there is no invisible God. That has been made up. That there is no invisible God that you need to go bow down to, or who's watching over you and who's going to punish you just for asking questions or for committing what you have been taught to be sins. The Most High's laws, y'all, they are just natural law. And the natural law when men deal with men is not to harm someone, including not harming yourself. Okay, y'all? And of course, due process of law. Right? Don't go doing, taking people's property, claiming people's property, and you haven't notified them, and they haven't had a chance to respond, and it hasn't been brought before a court that has jurisdiction over the matter. What I'm saying is very simplistic, but that's the essence of it. Okay, everybody knows that's common sense, right? If you do someone like that and they are aware of what you've done to them, what are they going to do to you, right? Especially in nature. Okay, y'all. So the Most High's commandments are just natural law, but of course there's more to that. But in terms of conscious, in terms of men and women dealing with each other, is do no harm. That's the essence of it. Stated differently, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Stated differently, natural law, constitutional principles. All of those are equivalent statements. Okay, y'all? Anyway, let's continue. By your own improvement. See, the education is improvement. By your own improvement. What a state of boobyism and ignorance they would have kept you in. Y'all see that? So you could have a PhD in engineering, but if you're involved in a religion and you believe and you live your life by a belief system, well, then you are ignorant. Okay, and I would have to agree with that. I would have to agree with it. But the more education you get, especially, and I'll be the first to tell you that much of scientific education like that you would get, let's say in medical school or something like that, a lot of that is doctrine. I can't say what it is because the last time I started talking like this, YouTube put a strike on one of my videos. But I can tell you that there's a lot of religious doctrine, okay, and a lot of the process, a lot of the procedures involved with, I don't even want to say the words, involved with diagnosis and treatment, the research, the procedures, etc., and the levels of, by procedure, I mean who the experts are, and those procedures that they need to follow in order to come up with a, I'm trying to think about how to say this without getting my video tagged, without getting a strike. Well, y'all just accept it. Y'all just, I'm gonna leave it at that. But there's a lot of religion in the medical sciences. Okay, a lot. But it's presented in a way that the average person won't realize it unless they have some knowledge about what a religion is and how to identify a religion. And you see the same thing. Okay, we have our high priest. I shouldn't even say we. Okay? But anyway, let's continue. The Hebrews, according to the author, page 242, the Jewish nation, now y'all know Jewish, that is a religion, is not a bloodline of people. The Jewish religion, according to academia, came into existence during or shortly after Babylonian captivity. So it is impossible for a religion to be a nation. So this, looking at this literally, makes absolutely no sense, because anyone can join a religion. Bloodline doesn't matter. A nation is a bloodline of people attached to a specific landmass, sharing a common culture, a common heritage, etc. A religion is an organization that has certain belief systems or doctrines, rituals and ceremonies, and anyone can join it based upon whatever their criteria is. But it is absolutely not a nation. So that's point number one. So the Hebrews, the Jewish nation, okay, he did not say the bloodline house of Yasharallah. He's identifying a religion being presented to you as a nation. So what is this an example of? This is an example of connotative linguistics and what, y'all? Narrative transportation. Do y'all see it? And narrative transportation, a Jewish nation. And I have to agree with them off the nipple. There never has been, never can be something called a Jewish nation, according to the meaning of nation, which I just gave you. Okay? So now, anyway, let's continue. The Hebrews, the Jewish nation, you have been taught to believe the descendants of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, y'all? That's absolutely true. A national and political people such as French, Dutch, Poles, Russians, amongst ourselves. A people that had once a political constitution. Note, y'all, that had once a political constitution. A constitution. King, lords, commons, borrowmongers of their own. Now remember, this author is British. Probably a British Moor, that's what I think. A European Moor. These lectures were given in London at a building called the Rotunda on Blackfriars Road in 1831. Okay? So he says, amongst ourselves. He's talking about Moors. So these French, Dutch, Poles, I don't know if he's talking about hybrids or the actual original European Moors. But let's continue. That's not the point. The point is they are organized under a contract. Not contract, but constitution. So let's continue. The immediate ancestors of the long-arrived and blue-faced gentlemen of the menagerie, whose existence to this day is a standing proof of the truth of divine revelation, suppose ye. Now, y'all, who are blue-faced gentlemen? I don't know what he means by blue-faced gentlemen. Does anyone know? Can you put in the comment section, what is he talking about? He says, the immediate ancestors of the long-armed and blue-faced gentlemen of the menagerie, whose existence to this day is a standing proof of the truth of divine revelation, suppose you. Let's continue. AA, it will do, you see, for a lecture on the evidences of the Christian religion, where the lecturer dare not suffer himself to be questioned. Okay, y'all? Have y'all ever had a professor like that? Don't want you to ask him any questions? I have. I have, and I always thought they didn't want me asking or anyone to ask questions because they didn't know how to answer. And it's nothing wrong if you don't know the answer, right? That's not the issue. The issue is they don't want you to learn. See, I had to learn that when someone doesn't want you asking questions, it's probably because they don't want you to learn, not because they don't know, because they don't want you to learn. Okay? If they're sitting there in front of that class teaching, they know everything that they need to know to get that position as a professor. So when they don't want you asking questions, that's saying I don't want to teach you anything but what I'm obligated to. Okay, y'all? You'll be surprised. The higher you go up in education, oftentimes the better the student you are and the more independent and free thinking you are, meaning that people can see that you're not going to go along to get along, or you're not going to go along with the program that they want you to go with. So they will try to isolate and or exclude you, try to prevent you from learning, discourage you. Even some of them will try to force you to drop out. I know I've experienced that from more than one professor. All right? Anyway, let's continue. But that's the way it is. That's the reality of it. All right? Higher education, when you are not willing to go along with the program, you know, maybe in my case, it was because I don't do something that I don't feel good about. Right? If I know it's wrong, I'm not going to do it. If I don't want to be a part of it, I'm not going to do it. And quite often, when people see you're like that, they don't want anything to do with you. Why? Because they're out here doing wrong, criminal stuff, taking advantage. Let's say like in school. I've seen, unfortunately, young ladies put in situations where they have sex They have sex with their professors. Or other people who, let's say, like if you're in the clinic, because they get put in a situation and they're either going to fail, right? When I was in medical school, you failed twice, they put you out. Well, they're either going to fail or get a very low grade or not get a letter of recognition. It could be anything that somebody holds over your head. And a lot of those young ladies, they would just do it. Sometimes I would hear them laughing about it. So it's very sad. But this kind of stuff goes on, y'all. But anyway, let's go back to it. So it will do, you see, for a lecture on the evidences of the Christian religion, where the lecturer dare not suffer himself to be asked questions, even in the most respectful and courteous manner in which an inquirer after truth could question the professed teacher of it. So you go ask your pastor or your general a question, right? And he goes or she goes ballistic on you, or they totally ignore you. Okay, even though you were very respectful, okay, you get a very negative reaction. Well, they don't want you to know. May not be that they don't know, it may be that they don't want you to know. Okay? But it would not do to abide the questions where? In what monument of past existence? In what document, line, word, or vestige of history? See, where is it memorialized in the record? Where is it memorialized in the record to prove these claims that you're making, Mr. Pastor, Mr. Religious Professor? Where are the documentations? And if the documentation is there, is it shady? Okay, what's the character of the man or woman who actually created that document, or who actually claim to have found it? What's their character? What's their background? See, are they shady? Are they untrustworthy? Okay, that's the type of information we need to get at. Just because someone claims to have found an artifact or a scroll, that doesn't mean it's real. Just because the experts look at it and everybody signs off on it, okay, this is real, this is what we think, that doesn't mean anything. What's the character of these people? What's the history of the institution? Okay? See, that's what we should be looking at before we give full faith and credit. Because a lot of these people are criminals. A lot of the institutions are criminals, and they're known criminals. But unless you check the record, you'll never know it. Unless you start asking analytical and critical thinking questions and searching out the answers in the record, you'll never know it. Okay? Anybody can put something on the record. Okay? If they want to make you believe something, they can have the top schools. They can have the top schools, professors from the top schools claim they found something, when the reality is that they created it. They claim they found it. They can plant it someplace where they know there's going to be an archaeological dig, or they could have someone go there and pretend like they found it. This is the kind of stuff that goes on. Okay, because remember, it's a mind game. It's a mind game. Okay? Psychic attacks. Anyway, let's continue. All right, y'all. Enough with that. Let's continue. The author says, by which alone we can know anything of what has been going on in the world before we came into it. So you need the evidence. You need the records. Have we a vestige of the existence of a Hebrew nation? Well, that's a great question. Where's the documentation? Where's the evidence that there that there existed at one time a Hebrew nation. Well, of course there never was a Hebrew nation, right? There are many groups of people who would be classified or of the Hebrew bloodline, right? So the author would have been better if he would have said Israelite or House of Yasharallah, or a specific family, a specific bloodline, instead of Hebrew nation. But we know what he's talking about, right? We know what he's talking about. Anyway, let's continue. The question can be answered only in the most decisive, the most unequivocal negation. That means the answer to the question is no, there has never been a Hebrew nation. And I would agree with him on that. There has not ever been a Hebrew nation. There are many nations who are Hebrews. Okay? He's talking about one single nation out of many. Okay, so he should have specified Israelites or something like that, right? So the author is in error here. Let's continue. The question that can be answered only in the most decisive, the most unequivocal negation that ever truth threw up in solution of any inquiry wherever. Nowhere in all the world, nowhere, in no era of time, in no state, or stone, or skin, or papyrus, or paper, and nothing that was ever plastered by a trowel, sketched by the style, graven by the chisel, or written by the pen of a human of a human hand, hath the world ever possessed a sketch of a scramblement that recognized the existence of a Hebrew nation, quote unquote, a holy nation, a peculiar people, a royal priesthood, end quote. Their only scriptural definition is a definition that expressly bars off and excludes any sense or understanding of their ever having existed as a political body or ordinary people in the national sense. Okay? Now, this, of course, was in 1831. So 200 years later, of course, the scholars have made many claims that they have found artifacts to prove the existence of Israel, but not a Hebrew nation, right? They have, that's true. But everything I have said applies to that. So, for example, those who say they are Jews and are not over in Northeast Africa, they've claimed to have found many artifacts in that area that identifies that as being the land of Israel in ancient times. Well, y'all should already know that that's not true. All right, but I made a video a couple years ago called the location of the promised land according to Moses. Y'all should watch the video. It shows you exactly where the promised land is, and it's not based upon a doctrine. It's based upon the etymology. Okay, based upon the etymology and the available histories. And it also, through that it shows you that all the books of Maccabees are made up stories. They're not real. That the Gospels are not real. Okay, so you can clear a lot of the fog webs out of your head by watching that video that I did. The promised land according to Moses, or the location of the promised land according to Moses. Okay? It was not where it's alleged to be right now. Okay? It just wasn't. And you'll see it based upon the evidence and not based upon doctrine. Because I don't deal with doctrine. So the same methodology that this author has taken you through is the same methodology I take you through, or that I use in the video, the Promised Land according to Moses, or the location of the Promised Land according to Moses. That's the way I do it, and it's indisputable. It's indisputable. Okay? Anyway, y'all, let's continue. Now, here's the other point. Exodus chapter 20 and in Deuteronomy 28, etc., that is a national contract or a national constitution. What is it? It's natural law. So it is a national constitution. But anyway, let's continue. But this letter to the Hebrews, anonymous as it is, yet of high antiquity, in other words, is old, 63 AD approximately. As in all soberances and truth, it must be admitted to be, is proof that there were persons or a community called the Hebrews. So the author is saying that there is proof that there was either a person or a group of people, a community of people called Hebrews. So a community, at least in today's terms, that means that this community has institutions. For example, in modern times, a community has a banks in it, hospitals, etc. All right? Communities of people, yes, and so are there. Without those things, it's called a neighborhood. Okay? Yes, and so are there, and so has there been, since the building of Solomon's temple, persons and communities of persons called Freemasons. Persons corresponding with each other by means of secret symbols and held together in a mystical corporation. Y'all hear that? Held together in a mystical corporation. So that means religion, right? Religion. So my understanding is Freemasons can be any religion as long as they believe in an external deity, an external God. Why? Because they're ruling over the people through religion. So it doesn't matter what religion you are, you only need to believe that there's an external God. So you can push that concept. Doesn't matter who the God is. Doesn't matter what the religion is. Okay, y'all? So what this is saying is that these Freemasons, who are, some of them are in the Jewish religion, some are in the Christian religion, some are in the Muslim religion, all the different religions, they come together behind closed doors through a corporation. And they're all working together. So in other words, the religion matters in the church or in the temple or in the synagogue. You're not supposed to mix with other religions, right? But behind closed doors, they formed their own organization called Freemasonry, and they work together. Everybody see it? The hypocrisy, the duplicity, the deceit. Anyway, let's continue. Okay? So these persons are called Freemasons, persons corresponding with each other by means of secret symbols and held together in a mystical corporation. Mystical corporation. By law and officers of their own. They got their own law, and they have their own offices and officers. Recognizing each other by certain winks of the eye, positions of the foot, lullings of the tongue within the cheek. Maybe something like that. I don't know. Grips of the hand and indentations of the thumb upon the wrist, which, escaping the notice of persons not informed in the craft of Freemasonry, easily discover those who are initiated to each other. So in other words, you meet somebody and then they do one of these signs that the author just gave. Okay? And then that's how they know that they're both Freemasons. And so they're going to work together. Okay? They're going to work together. Even though they don't know each other, even though they're of a different religion, etc. I heard Farrakhan give a speech in 1991. Okay? And it appears that Farrakhan is a Freemason too, based upon the video that I watched, because that's what he was talking. Maybe not a Freemason, maybe he's a Mason. See, there's nothing wrong with Masonry. There's nothing wrong with Masonry. The author is talking about Freemasons of the sort who use religion against the masses. So the knowledge itself, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a knowledge of nature. Masonry, the mother and her son, it's the knowledge of nature. Okay? Civilization. But it can be used in the negative by people who have a poor character or who are animalistic in their character, or it can be used to the positive by people who follow national principles, people who follow the Most High's commandments. Don't harm anyone, don't harm yourself, and then love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and then natural law, of course, due process of law. Okay, y'all? So the author is not saying that Masonry is bad. He's talking about Freemasons who use it in a negative way. Okay? Which is religion. One of the negatives, which is religion. And thus many a man is asked whether he is a Mason and what degree he has attained in the Masonic mysteries. By these dumb signs and pantomimic actions which no eye nor ear of any third person can possibly perceive. So unless you are in and you've been taught them, you'll never be able to perceive them when you see them. In other words, your eyes, in this case, your eyes, you got eyes to see, but you can't perceive, right? That's that principle right there, that the curse of the Christ, that they have actually implemented, okay, into handshakes and winks and signs. Eyes to see, but cannot perceive. Doing things in secret. Deception. The first or the second summons being misunderstood or unheeded, a third and a fourth of higher authority and of more imperative mystery communicated only to the higher graduates of the craft. Y'all got that? So those are who are at the lower levels, okay? When they come into contact with somebody, they'll do signs, right? They'll do signs. And if you don't know, if you missed the first one, they'll do it a second time or a third time or a fourth time. And then those at the higher levels, this would be, I'm assuming he's talking about the autops, the noble grand, and the royal ark, and the Hebrews. They got their own separate signs that the ones at the lower part don't know about. See, deception within the organization, or secrecy rather, within the organization. Just like Jesus secretly invited John, James, and Peter to the Transfiguration. The rest of the apostles didn't know, and they were told, don't tell them. Don't tell another man. So there's that principle or concept. We see it here. All right? So let's continue with this. Okay, so, and of more imperative mystery communicated only to the higher graduates of the craft, enables them to boast with truth, to boast with truth, that whatever mistakes may occur in this way amongst their inferior orders, the lower degrees, the higher dignitaries, this is in Greek, I'll show it. The holy brethren, so the Hebrews are the holy brethren. The holy brethren, these are the higher degrees, y'all, not the lower degrees. The higher degrees are the holy brethren that are, I believe, mentioned in the letter to the Hebrews. The holy brethren can recognize each other with infallible accuracy. Whatever countries they may be in, whatever language they may speak all over the world and through all eras of time. This page 244. So these high-level Freemasons are the holy brethren mentioned in the book of Hebrews. Okay, they are the holy brethren. Okay, and they are global. According to this author in 1831, they are global. Okay, and they have mastered their signs and signals. Okay, so if someone is in distress, no matter where they are in the world, they can do these signals, and one of their free Masonic brothers will come and help them. Okay, even if it's not distress, they want to do anything. Okay, they'll get help just because they're a Freemason. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's quite admirable, right? You help someone based upon principles, nothing wrong with that. By these symbols of higher authority than the common claims of humanity and the ordinary obligations of charity and man to man, they can demand and receive assistance from each other. That's admirable. In all distresses and inconveniences, that is admirable. Everyone should be like that. Okay? And that's probably the natural way to be. But let's look at the men and women in North America. Let's say the so-called black people. They've been enculturated, indoctrinated to not be able to work with each other, to not cooperate with each other at all, to take offense to being led by another man when you clearly don't know how to do something yourself, or in a position where there has to be a hierarchy, like, for example, a man, a consort, and his heirs. Okay, somebody has to be the authority. The buck stops with somebody, which in nature is the man. Okay, but if the woman can't accept the man's authority, how are you going to have a house like that? Okay, cannot be. Or, you know, you have a school, and the men who are students in the school, they take offense when the professor or teacher, who is a man, acts as a leader. They get offended, they get angry, talk smack, try to get other people to leave the school. Y'all know how it goes with our people. Or even worse, right? You're a family member, jealous of you, envious of you, call the boys on you, right? Make some false claim against you, try to get you harassed and arrested. Family members do this kind of stuff. I know they do it in my family. Have done it. I'm an eyewitness of it. All right? But anyway, let's keep going. So they assist each other in all distress and inconveniences. All right? And each good Mason will fly to the relief of his brother Mason. Will fly to the relief of his brother Mason, as an obedient son to the command of an affectionate father, as the right hand of one's own body will come to the assistance of the left, and that without any regard of country, age, condition, character, or religion of the Mason, who has thus need to be assisted, but solely and exclusively in virtue of consideration that he is a Mason. In other words, jealousy doesn't prevent the Mason from helping his brother. Envy doesn't prevent the Mason from helping his brother. What's in it for me doesn't prevent the Mason from helping his brother. He's helping him simply because he's a Mason. There's nothing wrong with that. That is absolutely admirable. And all people should live by that principle. All people should live by that principle. Hopefully everyone in the audience who's watching this video, hopefully y'all can see it, that's admirable. And in fact, that is a higher self mindset and behavior. The opposite is demonic, devilish, satanic, the way the black people are. And I might say, you know, I've traveled the world. I haven't been everywhere, but I've been many places. And the Africans who I have seen, people from the continent they call Africa, Al-Kibalan, they're the same way as the Moorish Americans are in terms of self-destructive, not cooperating with one another. Okay? The same mindset is it's just not to the extreme. Because they don't have a choice of who to buy from until they leave the country. And then you start to see that slave mentality or that bondman, that religious mentality. Y'all have a choice in North America. And you choose to deal with other people, or you choose to destroy everybody around you. Anyway, let's continue. Let me check the time. All right. Give me 1 second, y'all. All right. Let's keep going. And every good Mason is bound to wish and desire. Let me go back. I missed something. Okay. The moral uses, and the moral fitness and propriety of such an institution like Freemasonry, the morality of the institution of Freemasonry, if ever there was a fitness and propriety in it, must necessarily be diminished. The institution itself grow into destitute and neglect. So in other words, it started off good, but then it went bad. As every good Mason is bound to wish and desire that it should do in proportion as its end is achieved and its principles diffused. By the diffusion of civilization and consequently of universal benevolence, of universal good, of benefits to all men, of universal benevolence among men, when the whole world shall become one great lodge of Freemasons. In other words, Freemasons, the institution of Freemasonry, would teach civilization. Well, we know that they're not doing that now. Maybe in the beginning they were, but now, no. It's actually, but anyway, let's let the author speak. When the secret of the Lord shall be discovered of every individual on whom the sun doeth shine, as it exists at the present day in 1831, it is a slander upon reason and a disgrace to humanity. Yes, Freemasonry was hijacked. And they began to use the Gospels to put people in bondage and to steal birthrights and to conquer through war. And the conquest through war, as they accomplished their military goals, the physical fight was no longer necessary, no longer productive. It would have been counterproductive. So they switched from physical warfare or hot war to psychological warfare, psychic attacks, okay? Mental bondage. And what? Ultimately, bondage through the financial system. Y'all got it? Bondage through a fiat system. And all of this was supported by translation, by biblical translators, biblical scholars, preachers and pastors, all the religions. I'm speaking in the West. The scholars and those on the ground, in the churches and synagogues. All of them participated. And the scholars, the Bible scribes, they made translations to reflect the social engineering goals of the political system, right? All of them are, all Christianity is Catholicism. So they're working together through Freemasonry. They did it through the courts, right? The courts, public policy, through the political system, and through the religious system, and through commerce, through corporations, okay? Everybody see that? And then all the way down to the lowest level, the municipal level, the level of the community. They all work together through Freemasonry. So this is the corruption of Freemasonry, according to the author. As it exists at the present day, it is a slander upon reason and a disgrace to humanity. Freemasonry is a slander upon reason and a disgrace to humanity in 1831. Boys and lubberly garçons in a drunken frolic. So they were drunks, right? They had the power and the money, and they were using it to party, celebrating. And for the mere joke of the thing, may have been betrayed into the first ceremonies of the idolish mummery. But sure but sure I am that there is not a sensible and honest man on earth who, when reminded of such a proof of his boyish folly, so the author, I think, is alluding to that in Freemasonry, there's a bunch of grown men running around acting like little boys and teenage boys. In other words, they're abusing their power. So they got money, they got power, all right? They got everything. And they're acting like, they're being very childish, okay, and self-destructive. This is what the author is saying, all right? Let me go back. Okay, so it says here, I am, but sure I am, I'm sure that, in other words, I'm sure that there is not a sensible and honest man on earth who, when reminded of such a proof of his boyish folly as his having become a Mason, so okay, like a gang member, okay, will not hang his head on his own, himself ashamed of it. All right, so when you get into Freemasonry, you do, it's like joining a gang, and you do things that are childish, irresponsible, and things that you should be ashamed of. A Freemason is another word for a full professed. So it's appearing to me that this author, who himself was a Freemason and became disillusioned, he must have become disillusioned and disgusted with what the other Freemasons were doing. he was probably, well, not probably, definitely, I can tell, he wouldn't have made this information public if he wasn't sincere. Well, that's not true either. He could have did it spitefully, right? He could have did it as revenge. So let me not speak to his motive. But what he is saying, as far as I can see, is that people who joined Freemasonry in 1831 were childish, irresponsible, having something missing in their experience in life. Like today, people who join gangs are usually people who don't have a father, or what? They're raised in a home where one or both of the parents are alcoholics or drug addicts. Y'all see it? Some major deficiency in their background. So they're joining Freemasonry. This is what I'm getting from this. Now, page 244. But in earlier days, so now here's the contrast. But in earlier days, through the days of an indefinitely remote antiquity, such an institution as that of Masonry, as it had its necessity, had its sanctity, its right, its justice, its utility in that need, which those of the human race, Han Uman, who first emerged from the state of barbarous ignorance into reason, intelligence, and science, had to protect themselves from the incursions of the monkeys, baboons, and wild men of the woods. That sounds like Han Uman to me. Protect yourself from the monkeys, the baboons, and wild men. Y'all look up orangutan. Is it orangutan? Maybe orangutan. Look up troglodyte. And you're going to see that there is, it is defined as primate type men who live in the woods. Y'all look it up. Look it up. In South America, they found villages with statues of Han Uman, half man, half monkeys, that were buried. And these statues have been uncovered in South America. So if y'all know the story about the origin of the hybrid troglodyte niggers, the hybrids, you'll know that the research and experimentation was done in South America. Argentina, Patagonia, other places, I believe Chile, what's now called Chile, other places like that. So there's evidence of this stuff, okay? With whom, so these monkeys, baboons, and wild men of the woods. Now there's also artwork from the Middle Ages that shows hybrids such as these attacking Moors. And they're battling. Okay? Can you imagine if you see in real life what a monkey or an ape walking and talking like a man, or something looks like a man and a wolf, a man and a lion, and you got to fight these animals, right? Y'all have seen the artwork, right? In Europe, with Moors fighting these hybrids. Anyway, let's continue. So the author is saying here that Freemasonry was necessary, or it was beneficial, rather. It was used for good during this time to protect the people, to protect the Moors. Okay, now I also do recall, maybe it was Farrakhan. Maybe it was Farrakhan This was so long ago, y'all, maybe in the 80s or 90s when I heard this. It just came to my mind. Farrakhan talked about Moses going up into Europe, civilizing the Europeans. Okay, so he would have had to have been talking about the hybrids, right? But anyway, let's continue. So it says here, with whom the conflict was continually the struggle of wit against brute force. Okay, so this is the owl. This is the Owl of Monroe. Y'all saw that movie from I think it came out in the 60s, remade in the late 90s. The Isle of Dr. Monroe, the Isle of the Moors, where these experiments were done. Yaqub. Okay, the story of Yaqub, creating the white race. Okay, so the conflict was continually the struggle of wit, so the Moorish wit, the intellect of the Moorish, against the brute force of the hybrids, and who were only to be kept aloof by stratagem, overawed by mystery, and ruled by terror. So this is sounding to me like the battle between the hybrids and the Moors that the author is referring to. To keep off these, it was always the first care of a master mason to see, quote unquote, the lodge properly tiled, end quote. Graduations of mystery and trials of the strength of understanding of those whose curiosity urged them to wish to penetrate into the, what does this say? Arcana of Masonry. I'm on page 245, the first sentence. Were absolutely necessary to protect the cradle of infant science. Infant science, right? According to the author, science was just beginning to grow. This is what we just read in the last paragraph. Now, of course, that's not true. Man has always been on earth. Millions, if not billions, forever, ever, and ever, 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 ever. There's no time when man was not. Man has always been on the planet. Man has always been highly advanced, having high science and engineering. Okay, just period. So I disagree strongly with the author here. Okay, I disagree very strongly. But we'll just roll with him. Okay, we're rolling with him. This is how he's explaining Freemasonry. Okay, so those whose curiosity urged them to wish to penetrate into the arcana of Masonry were absolutely necessary to protect the cradle of infant science from the incursion of the wolves of the wilderness, and the same law of nature by which man feels that more is due to man from man than from man to inferior animals. In other words, men have an obligation and a duty to each other, but men have a lesser obligation and duty to animals. Right? All men are equal, but animals are inferior to men. Both justified and authorized the esprit du corps, which attached the mason to his brother mason, as man more properly to his brother man, as brother in the possession of a rational nature, and in that sympathy of desire to enlarge his faculties, enlarge his understanding of the world, of nature, and to cultivate his reason, to educate himself by learning about nature, which he who have not, though he may be the best Christian that ever breathed, is, note y'all, is but a monkey still. So I'm correct. I'm correct with what I was talking about. He's talking about hybrids. Okay, so the hybrid is still a monkey. Without knowledge of nature, the hybrid is still a monkey. And unfortunately, the more who is in religion and has no knowledge of nature is to be treated like an animal, like a monkey. Now, isn't that what they call you, black niggas, monkeys, and apes? Right, y'all? Right? But who's the real or the original Negro, the original nigga? Whose paternal side is a monkey? It's the hybrid. Y'all see it? So they switch places with you. This is what they did when they took over Freemasonry. Okay, so if you refuse to follow the Most High's commandments, which are natural law, you're going to be treated like an animal. What does that mean? You're going to be denationalized, and you're going to be put in bondage, and you're going to be made surety for somebody else's obligations. Why? Because you corrupted the blood of the covenant, corrupted the blood of the contract, right? Which is what? Remember Moses sprinkled the blood of the grapes on the people? When the people agreed to follow the Most High's commandments, which are natural law. Remember our ancestors, as the story goes in the book of the law, our ancestors agreed to follow natural law. It was first a verbal contract, and then it was followed up, it was memorialized, as the story goes, in stone, twice. Y'all remember? I shall prove, and not only was it a contract or a covenant, it is a trust agreement. And everyone in every family has an estate. And every son, my son, Mason, every son with or without a womb has an estate and is the substance and subject matter of the law. Okay? Can exercise the executive, judicial, and legislative authority, the reserved rights of the people. Under the Constitution for the United States of North America and the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the Moroccan Empire and the United States for North America, the Treaty 1836. Let me see, what time is it? All right, y'all. So let's stop here on page 245. We'll pick up on the first paragraph. Islam to all the Moors. Thanks, y'all, for supporting my work. Links to my classes and books, and also to our textbook, which is the Devil's Pulpit, is in the description area of this video. Islam to all the Moors, and Shalom.